Hello everyone, welcome to Homework Help. If you find the video useful, please subscribe to the channel. So in this video, we'll solve this problem using the concepts of vector addition. So as per the problem, ABCDEFGH is a rectangular prism. So in part A, we have to write a single vector that is equivalent to EG plus vector GH plus vector HD plus vector DC. So let's start with part A. So we have to write a single vector for vector EG So let's start with the first two vectors EG plus GH. Now in vector EG, we go from point E to G and then we go from G to H. So that means the sum of these two vectors should be from E to H. So vector EH. So we can rewrite the given statement as so we kind of like cancel out G from the two vectors we just added. So we are left with EH. Now we have to add vectors EH and HT. So in vector EH, we go from point E to point H, and then in vector HD, we go from point H to point D. So when we add these two vectors, we go from E to H and then from H to D. So that means we go from E to D. So the sum of these two vectors should be vector ED. Now we can add vectors ED and DC. So in vector ED, we go from point E to point D, and then in vector DC, we go from point D to point C. So that means we go from point E to point C when we add these two vectors. So the sum of these two vectors should be vector EC. So this should be the final answer for part A. Now we can analyze part B. Write a vector that is equivalent to EG plus GD plus DE. So let's start with the first two vectors EG plus GD. So in the first vector EG we go from E to G, and then in the second vector we go from G to D. So when we add these two vectors we go from E to D. So that means the sum of these two vectors is vector ED. So the G's get cancelled out in those two vectors that we just added. Now we have to add vectors ED and DE. So in the first vector we go from point E to point D, and in the second vector we go from D to E. So that means when we add these two vectors we go from E to E. So the D's get cancelled out. Now since both points E are the same, that means this is a zero vector. So the result of this vector addition statement is 0. Another way to analyze this is that when we add vectors ED and DE, they are opposite of each other. So they are same vectors, but they are opposite of each other. So we can rewrite this statement as So DE vector is equivalent to minus ED vector. So when we do add these two vectors, ED plus minus ED, we get 0. So this is another way of analyzing this vector addition. Now we can analyze part C. Is it true that magnitude of HB is equal to magnitude of GA? Now HB vector represents the diagonal vector from point H to point B. The magnitude of this vector HB represents the length of this diagonal. So the magnitude of HB is length of diagonal HB. Now the magnitude of vector GA is another diagonal in this rectangular prism from G to A. So we can write that. Now in a rectangular prism, diagonals have equal length. Therefore, the magnitude of vector HB is equal to the magnitude of vector GA. So this is a communication question. So this is how you can present your answer. So these are the steps you have to keep in mind to answer a question like this one. So I hope you'll find this video useful. Please share it, like it, and subscribe to Homework Help. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye.